All right, well, welcome, guys. We are in a E4 study on interpersonal relationships, and here's our first roundtable. For those of you who are watching this, I've got Dr. Fisher, who is part of the Bath campus, who directs Know It and is a pastor at the Bath campus. And then we have the venerable, the wonderful Pastor Bob Combs, I think of the Norton campus, but kind of the visionary and the pastor over what winds up being all of our campuses. So I appreciate you guys being here and kind of giving us some of your thoughts, your wisdom, and your experience on just what you've come to know about interpersonal relationships, handling conflict, dealing with pain, all that kind of good stuff. So got a couple questions for you, and then we'll just kind of dive into discussion. The first is, in the accompanying session in E4 for this roundtable, we've been talking about not only the experience of pain, how pain develops in our lives based upon our experience a lot of times when we're very young, that sort of begins to be constructed in us subconsciously. But we've also been talking about dealing with pain. So the first question I would ask you guys in your experience from where you've come from is, how does God use the pain? We've talked a little bit about that. How does God use the pain we experience in our relationships to grow us? How does that happen? How have you seen that?
Well, pain is a great teacher. I think that C.S. Lewis, that we often quote, said that in our pleasure, God whispers to us, but in our pain, He's shouting at us. In fact, he said, pain is God's megaphone, and I've never forgotten that. I've often made this statement, and I got this from Gordon MacDonald. All of my defining moments have been painful. And I find that very, very true. Now, that may not be true for everybody, but it's been true for me. One of the most painful times in my life was when my wife and I were going through horrific marriage problems. And in the middle of that, somehow I was reading a book. I can't even tell you what the name of it is right off, but it was written by a guy from England. And he talked about 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And he had a whole chapter on this couple verses. It was the verses that talk about the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our affliction. But he broke this thing down, and I remember reading that chapter that he had on these two verses. And here's a couple things he pointed out that really, really grabbed me. He said, in the King James, it talks about the God of all comfort, but then he said that word comfort could be translated strength. And he felt that for many people that may be more...
made a huge difference in how...
made of how we look at it, because sometimes we think comfort as kind of almost a weak thing, bless your heart,
Pat on the back.
Whereas we think of a strength, okay, somebody's going to strengthen me.
Sure.
And that was helpful, the God of all strength. But then when you put that together, and when he talks about the God of all strength, who helps you in your tribulation. Now, new versions don't use that word, but King James did. But that word comes from a Latin term that was an instrument used in wheat harvest called the tribulum. And it was very fascinating as I read that. And the tribulum was used to beat against the sheaves of grain. And it got the grain out of the sheaves, from the
good
beating.
Stuff, right?
Yeah, the good stuff, yeah. And I remember reading that, and I remember I started to cry. I said, oh God, I'm taking a beating.
Wow.
And I was. I was taking a beating. And I remember praying and saying, God, if you can help others, because I get new strength through this, you're allowed to hit me again. that was a defining moment for me.
Sure.
But it's interesting. It was a very painful moment.
You know, I think that's very insightful, just to hear you say that. My mind also thinks of the refining fire concept that Peter
Yeah.
talks about during hardships and persecution and pain. It's almost like we have this idea that pain is always bad,
Yeah.
and we want to avoid it.
Yeah, at all costs.
At all cost. I mean, we think of it emotionally right now, but it also is physical. I mean, I know when I get hurt, I scream.
Yeah.
And it gets my attention. And when we get sick, we think, okay, why is this happening? We always think
Yeah,
negative.
we do. That's true.
And I've often thought that you almost have to see pain as part of the process. I know that we have nerves for that very purpose. In other words, they're not there just so we can feel pleasure. They're
Yeah.
there so we can also feel pain.
Yes.
And they're there to warn us. They're there to guide us through and to keep us from harm. And we learn from them. Actually, we learn from the pain. And I think people need to sort of step back, because I was just,
Yeah, it's good.
you know, I was thinking about McDonald when he said that.
Yeah.
He didn't feel that way when he first got into it, and he didn't feel that way when he was during the process.
Yeah.
But when he looked back, then he goes, "Oh, that's what I have learned the most."
Yeah.
But it's almost the thing that you have to work on your mind to look at the situation. And it's almost like you have to say, you know, God is my Father. He loves me, and He's working in my life now. And I don't quite grasp it, but it's almost like the situations, there's going to be pain or pleasure. Both of them are the learning processes. And I think sometimes we almost have to say to ourselves, life is a learning process. I'm growing up, not just to be me, but to be who God designed me to be. And I'm not there yet.
Right. Right.
That's good.
That's true.
And it's almost like you have to live with the end in view.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, I would say there's three principles. It's just broad principles. You have to live with the end in view. You have to realize there is a process of training and teaching, and you have to expect the process to take some type of effort, or what we would call pain pleasure.
Sure.
As you learn. And then you have to learn that God teaches us, or life teaches us also, and people work with us in situations. So you're looking at the present situation. You're expecting that there's going to be a process, but you keep the end in view.
Yeah.
And then I think this is where at the McDonald's there's always this comes from a new book I'm reading too.
That's awesome.
We're always reading, called Pails. It's a very interesting book. It talks about the opportunities of life, the actualization of taking the opportunity and pouring it into another pail, which is your legacy. And it's almost like the future, the present, the past. In other words, McDonald looked back, and the legacy that he was able to develop, or the past, the legacy that is powerful, is what he was able to sense about pain.
Yeah.
And I guess I get frustrated. Maybe you can introduce. I get frustrated because I get mad at pain too, and I don't learn about it. And I know about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always there, working on us.
And I don't want to miss it.
Oh, that's
I really don't. I often think, okay, God, what are you doing? Don't let me miss the lessons that are here.
Do you find yourself getting angry at God right away in the midst of pain, or at least beginning to doubt and question?
I used to, but I, especially back the story I was telling you during my marriage problems, I certainly was probably somewhat angry back there. But I've realized that God is painting a picture. And I'm only at this point in the picture. I can't see the whole picture. But I want him to complete the picture. And I know it's a good picture of my life. And I don't want to miss what he wants to teach me in the middle of the pain. Because then that means I'm not going to help somebody that I could have helped if I'd learned the lessons that I need to learn in the middle of the pain.
This is amazing. So it helps me understand as you guys are talking. Like I think about Hebrews 12, where the author to Hebrews says it is for discipline that you have to endure. So there's
Yeah.
that kind of with the end in mind concept. We
Sure.
endure because we understand that there's something beyond the pain, that the pain is actually, that God is using the pain to bring us through. And then I love that though, because it helps put it in a bit more perspective, and that when you go through that passage, a lot of times we'll equate discipline with equals punishment.
Yeah.
And sure, that punishment may be included in that, but discipline there, right, is more the complete or holistic instruction that got a child into adulthood or maturity.
Yeah.
And that God is actually using pain to get us from here to there with the end in mind, and giving us that kind of anchor in the future that to show us what he's pulling us to.
Well, if we know, and I do, that I am loved by God, I am a child of God, and I'm made in His image, there's probably something very divine about me, because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made by God.
Sure.
And okay, God, I want you to bring all that out. So He's developing me, and it's fun, really, to recognize God showed up and used me there. And if I hadn't learned things back here in my pain,
Right.
He couldn't have used me there.
Do you think that one of the things that keeps us from doing that is that we're so selfish,
Oh, absolutely.
and we're so consumed by what we call the
Absolutely.
pleasures of our flesh?
Yes.
And so we can't even imagine why pain should be part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you said it becomes fun, you use the word, or maybe
Yeah.
joy-filled.
Oh, yeah.
That seems contradictory to somebody who's just approaching pain in the way you're describing.
Yeah.
It seems like what we were just talking about here is a very positive way to approach life in general.
Oh.
It's almost like,
Yeah.
my friends, don't be surprised when you have trials
Right.
and heartaches in life,
Yeah.
because they're there to teach us, to bring us to maturity.
Right.
You have to trust God. Don't doubt Him.
Yeah.
It seems like it's real positive. But what I run into, and I know you run into this too, is why do then people hurt so much in the midst of pain, and why does it affect their whole outlook on life? It's almost like it turns it from daytime to night. And that's I guess
Well,
that's
their viewpoint isn't adjusted enough. Have you ever read Where's God When It Hurts?
yes.
It's a great book, and it kind of addresses that whole question. I love that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about what pain and the experience of our past hurts, and how God even uses that. Again, interesting that we can even call that a joy-filled process. It seems backwards, but it's not. So we can look at it that way, and probably the mature view is to view it that way. But we all know that though we hurt ourselves from past experiences, and we have pain in our relationships as a result of that, we know simultaneously that's the case for other people that we actually interact with. So, Pastor Rob, frequently we hear you say, hurting people hurt people. So if we're going to look at maybe this side of pain, and how we not only deal with pain in our own lives and see it from God's point of view, but how we interact and view others in light of the fact that we now know that they're working through hurt and pain as well. You say hurting people hurt people. First of all, maybe I'd ask, why is that? Why do you think that's the case? And then secondly, or a corollary question might be, how does knowing or recognizing the fact that hurting people hurt people help us better understand others, and then ultimately deal with the conflict that probably results from the fact that hurting people hurt people?
well, I don't know where I first got the statement, but I feel so strong about it. Hurt people do hurt people. Here's a book called Broken Children, Grown Up Pain. Much of the time, the hurts that are in people's lives started when they were very young. They had traumatic experiences. Stuff was done to them as little kids that should never have been. I have to listen to this over and over again. Many times I cry with adults over their childhood and the horrible pain they've been through. But when they haven't processed some of that stuff, which sometimes we don't process, and when they don't see God in it, they become very angry people. And those hurting people don't like who they are, and they don't like who you are either, and they won't make you, they want to make you hurt. I mean, it just almost a reaction. And many times you may remind them of the person that hurt them. And so they want to hurt you because you comb your hair a certain way, or because you wear a certain kind of perfume, or aftershave or whatever, that reminds them of their hurts.
Yeah.
And
I got to give my own right now 3 or 4 different examples of that.
Yeah. So they are hurting, and they want to hurt you because they want you to hurt too.
It's like they've got so much hurt inside of them, they've got to get it out.
Right.
Wow.
And it's helpful for me to understand this, because then I don't take it so personally. Many times I didn't do anything wrong. Now, certainly if I have, I need to acknowledge that. But many times, really, the pain they're inflicting on me isn't connected to me at all. It's connected to their own pain.
Right.
I will handle that much better if I recognize that.
Right.
See, then I don't take responsibility for their hurts. And honestly, I shouldn't take responsibility for your hurts. Now, I can try to give you tools to deal with them. I want to help you and I have compassion for you. But if I take on the responsibility of your hurts, I'm after a while going to have so much weight on me, I can't function. We talk about taking responsibility. Yeah, we need to, but sometimes we need to understand I should not take responsibility. When we're not responsible, I have no business taking responsibility, and we have problems with both of those. So the statement really is true. Hurting people hurt people, and I don't get hurt by them like I used to, because it's not my responsibility that they're hurting. So
You're filtering the reaction first through this understanding that it's probably not me. There's some we used the word triggers before. There's some kind of trigger that's been erupted in them.
Yeah.
I think what happens too, you'll get 2 people whose lives are dysfunctional, and both of them hurt or on the verge of hurting, and they actually, by the way they respond, they increase the hurt.
Yep. They hurt each other.
They hurt each other.
Yeah, that's very true.
And it's almost like let's say your body is just like a container, and if it's just full of hurt, it just sort of pours out of you. Whenever you're bumped, hurt spills out.
Spills over.
More pus comes out.
And what's happened is I think when we interact with people who are hurting, and we ourselves have not experienced the forgiveness, the love. Usually we've tried to pray and it doesn't work, or we've asked people to stop and they don't, and so we get more angry. And I mean, all this, it's almost like when you come up against someone who's hurting, you have the choice to help them, like coming to a doctor, or you have the choice just to egg it on. And I think a lot of it is misunderstanding. I think you're right. We take it personal.
Yeah.
And God has already said that's what we place on the cross.
Yeah.
And we give that to Christ and to God. And then it gives us, we then take on the ministry of reconciliation.
Yeah, the power of forgiveness becomes ours when we realize we've been forgiven.
Otherwise, you're just increasing. You're either helping the problem or you're
increasing the problem.
You're increasing it.